Imagine for a second that everything you know about global power is about to change. For the last 100 years, the world has been running on a single substance, crude oil. It has fueled our wars, built our cities, and made some nations unimaginably rich, while leaving others desperate and dependent. But what if I told you that right now, buried deep beneath the frozen ground in a remote part of Canada, there's a resource that doesn't just replace oil, but makes it look as outdated as a horse and cart on a highway? And here's the kicker. This resource, this one discovery, could be worth more than the entire GDP of most countries on Earth. We're talking about a rock, a specific type of rock found in abundance in Canada that contains an element so rare and so valuable that it could literally end the age of oil overnight. The number attached to this discovery? A staggering $26 trillion. Yes, trillion with a T. This isn't just about money. This is about energy independence, space travel, and the future of humanity. If you are ready to find out how Canada just became the most powerful energy nation on the planet, you are in the right place. But before we dive deep into the science and the money, make sure you hit that like button right now and subscribe to Canada Global Economics. We break down these massive shifts in power and money so you actually understand what is happening to the world. Trust me, by the end of this video, you're going to see the global map in a completely different way. Let us rewind for a moment and talk about why oil has had such a chokehold on the world. It is actually pretty simple. Oil is dense. A single barrel of it contains an insane amount of concentrated energy. You can pump it out of the ground, refine it, and put it in a tank. And it will move a 2-ton metal machine for hundreds of miles. That efficiency is what built the modern world. But oil has a massive, massive problem. It is dirty, it is running out, and frankly, it is becoming a geopolitical nightmare. Countries that have it, like Saudi Arabia and Russia, have used it as a weapon for decades. They control the supply, they control the price, and everyone else just has to pay up and hope for the best. But the real dirty secret about oil, it is terrible for moving humanity off this planet. You cannot fly a rocket to Mars on gasoline. The future of exploration, the future of commerce, is not in the Middle East. It is in the stars. And to get there, we need a different kind of fuel. We need something so powerful that a tiny amount of it could power a city for a year. We need something that exists in almost negligible quantities on Earth, but is incredibly common somewhere else. And that is where Canada comes in with this $26 trillion rock. So what exactly is this magical substance we are talking about? It is called helium-3. Now, you have probably heard of helium, right? The stuff you put in birthday balloons that makes your voice go squeaky. Helium-3 is its lesser-known cousin, and it is infinitely more valuable. It is an isotope, which is just a fancy way of saying it has a slightly different atomic structure. And that different structure makes it the perfect fuel for something called nuclear fusion. Now, I know nuclear sounds scary to a lot of people. We have all seen the movies about meltdowns and mutants. But fusion is the opposite of the dirty nuclear power we use today. Fusion is the same process that powers the sun. It is clean, it is safe, and it produces almost no radioactive waste. The problem? To create fusion on Earth, you need fuel. And for the most efficient, cleanest type of fusion, you need helium-3. But here on Earth, helium-3 is incredibly rare. It is trapped in the mantle of the Earth, and only tiny amounts seep out. We are talking about just a few kilograms of this stuff existing naturally on our entire planet. A few kilograms. That is like trying to power the world's energy grid with a single AA battery. It just doesn't work. However, there is a place in our solar system where helium-3 is not rare. It is everywhere. And that place is the moon. For billions of years, the moon has been sitting there without an atmosphere, getting constantly bombarded by solar wind from the sun. That solar wind carries particles of helium-3. And because the moon has no magnetic field and no air, those particles just bury themselves into the lunar soil, or what scientists call regolith. Over billions of years, the moon has accumulated millions of tons of this stuff. Experts estimate there could be over 1 million tons of helium-3 on the lunar surface. Now, here is where the math gets absolutely insane. Scientists have calculated that just 1 single ton of helium-3, if used in a fusion reactor, could generate the same amount of energy as 50 million barrels of oil. 50 million. And that brings us back to Canada. This is the part of the story that sounds almost too good to be true, but it is absolutely real. Canada is not waiting for moon mining to become a thing, because Canada has discovered that it has been sitting on a massive terrestrial source of helium-3 this entire time. It is not coming from the ground in the traditional way oil comes up. It is coming from something else entirely. Deep within the Canadian Shield, one of the oldest and most stable geological formations on the planet, there are rocks that have been trapping gases for billions of years. Recently, exploration companies in Canada, particularly in Saskatchewan, started drilling for helium, the regular stuff, which is also valuable for things like MRI machines and scientific research. But when they started analyzing the gas coming out of these wells, they realized they had stumbled onto something far bigger. The isotopic signature of the gas matched helium-3, not just trace amounts, but commercially viable quantities. If you're just joining us, we are in the middle of breaking down the biggest energy story of our lifetime. In the first part, we talked about the discovery itself, that Canada is sitting on an estimated $26 trillion worth of helium-3, a substance so powerful it could make oil obsolete and power the entire planet for thousands of years. We talked about how this isotope is the perfect fuel for clean nuclear fusion, and how Canada's ancient geology has been trapping this treasure for billions of years. But now we have to answer the big question that is probably on your mind. If this stuff is so amazing, why are we not already powering our homes with it? Why are we still fighting wars over oil if there is a $26 trillion rock sitting up north? The answer, as always with big discoveries, comes down to two things: technology and politics. And both of these factors are about to shift in a massive way. Let's tackle the technology problem first, because it is the one everyone talks about. Helium-3 is useless without a fusion reactor to burn it in. And the truth is, we are not quite there yet. For decades, fusion energy has been that thing that is always 30 years away. Scientists have been chasing it because it promises limitless clean energy with no meltdown risk and no long-term nuclear waste, but making it work is incredibly hard. You have to create a tiny star on Earth, a ball of plasma heated to hundreds of millions of degrees, and then contain it so it doesn't melt through the floor. It is like trying to bottle a lightning bolt. Most fusion research so far has focused on using two forms of hydrogen, deuterium and tritium. That reaction is easier to achieve, but it produces a lot of neutrons, which makes the reactor radioactive over time. It is messy. But helium-3 fusion is the holy grail. When you combine helium-3 with deuterium, the reaction releases energy but produces almost no neutrons. It is practically radiation-free. The problem is that it requires even higher temperatures and more precise containment. It is a harder nut to crack. So for a long time, the argument has been, why bother chasing helium-3 fusion when we can barely get the easier hydrogen fusion to work? But here is where the story gets interesting. Because of Canada's discovery, that calculation is starting to change. When you have a massive, accessible supply of the fuel, suddenly investing in the technology to use it makes a lot more sense. Private companies and government labs are now pouring billions into helium-3 fusion research. There are startups in Canada and around the world that are building new types of reactors specifically designed to burn this fuel. Some of them are using something called field reversed configuration. Others are using spherical tokamaks. The technology is advancing faster than most people realize. We're not talking about science fiction anymore. We're talking about working prototypes. And here's the thing that a lot of people miss. Once the first commercial helium-3 fusion reactor comes online, the entire energy industry flips upside down overnight. Coal plants become museums. Oil rigs become scrap metal. Gas pipelines become obsolete. And every single one of those industries will have to come to Canada to buy their fuel. That is the kind of technological leap that creates millionaires and billionaires out of ordinary people who happen to own land or stock in the right companies. Now let's talk about the politics, because this is where things get really juicy. The moment Canada realized what it had, you can bet that phones started ringing in Washington, in Beijing, in Moscow, and in Brussels. The existing energy powers of the world did not get rich by being stupid. They know exactly what helium-3 means. For Russia, which depends on oil and gas sales to keep its economy alive, this is an existential threat. For Saudi Arabia, it is a nightmare. Their entire national strategy is built on the assumption that the world will need oil for decades to come. If Canada suddenly becomes the only supplier of fusion fuel, the petrodollar collapses, and the power shifts from the Middle East to North America. But it is not just the oil states that are worried. The United States and China are also paying very close attention. They are not worried about losing oil money. They are worried about who controls the future. And this is where Canada has to play an incredibly careful game. Canada has a unique position in the world. It is a trusted ally of the United States, a member of the Five Eyes intelligence network, and a stable democracy with strong rule of law. But it also has a massive trade relationship with China. So what happens when China comes knocking with a checkbook and says, we want to buy all the helium-3 you can produce and we will pay double whatever anyone else offers? Does Canada sell? Or does it listen to its American allies who say that this resource is too strategic to be sold to a potential adversary? This is not a hypothetical question. It is happening right now. There are lobbyists in Ottawa representing every major power on Earth, all trying to shape the regulations and export controls that will determine who gets access to this treasure, and the decisions made in the next few years will determine the balance of global power for the rest of this century. But let's bring this back to the ground level for a minute, because this is Canada Global Economics, and we care about what this means for regular people. The helium-3 boom is not just going to benefit big corporations and foreign governments. It is going to transform the Canadian economy from coast to coast. Think about the jobs first. Extracting helium-3 from deep underground is not like pumping oil. It requires high-tech drilling, sophisticated gas separation plants, and world-class laboratories to process and purify the isotope. The geopolitical map of the world, our own extraction technologies, we will wake up one day and realize we missed the boat. The resource is here, but the knowledge, the patents, and the profits could all end up elsewhere if we are not aggressive about developing our own capabilities. There is also the threat of internal division. You know as well as I do that whenever a major resource is discovered in Canada, the question of who owns it becomes a political firestorm. The provinces will argue with the federal government, Indigenous nations will assert their rights and title, environmental groups will raise legitimate concerns about drilling and land disturbance, and all of these voices deserve to be heard. But if we let those disagreements turn into gridlock, if we let perfect become the enemy of good, then the opportunity slips away. The path forward has to be one of partnership. It means revenue sharing agreements that make Indigenous communities full equity partners in development, not just consultants who get a small check and a thank you. It means federal and provincial governments coordinating their regulations so that companies are not trapped in a maze of red tape. It means environmental oversight that is strict but predictable, so investors know the rules and can plan accordingly. This is the Canadian way, balancing development with responsibility. And if we can pull it off, the model we create will be studied and copied around the world. Now, I want to talk to you directly for a moment. The reason we made this video, the reason Canada Global Economics exists, is because we believe that understanding these big shifts is the first step to benefiting from them. The people who get ahead in life are not necessarily the smartest or the hardest working. They are the ones who see the trend lines early and position themselves accordingly. So whether you are a young person thinking about what career to pursue, an investor looking for the next big thing, or just someone who wants to understand what the future holds for your country, this information is valuable. The helium-3 boom is coming. It might take 5 years, it might take 15, but it is coming. And the decisions you make today, the skills you learn, the businesses you start, the stocks you buy, they can all be shaped by this knowledge. Do not be the person who looks back in 20 years and says, I heard about that, but I did not do anything about it. Before we wrap this up, I need to ask you for a favor. If you have watched this whole series, if you made it to the end of part 3, that tells me you are exactly the kind of person we want in this community. You are curious, you are thoughtful. You care about where this country is headed. So I need you to do 2 things. First, leave a comment right now. Tell me where you're watching from and what you think about this helium-3 discovery. Do you think Canada can pull it off? Are you optimistic or skeptical? I read every single comment, and I promise you, the engagement from viewers like you is what keeps this channel going. It tells the algorithm that this content matters, and it helps new people find us. Second, share this video. Send it to a friend, post it on social media, put it in a group chat. Because this is the kind of information that people need to see. It is not doom-scrolling content. It is not celebrity gossip. It is the real story of how the world is changing. And the more people who understand it, the better conversations we can have as a country. So let me leave you with this final thought. A century ago, a different resource was discovered in this land. They called it black gold. It built cities, created dynasties, and funded wars. But it also left scars on the landscape and tied us to a cycle of boom and bust. Now we have a second chance. We have been given a gift that could power a clean, prosperous, and peaceful future. The question is not whether the helium-3 is there. It is. The question is whether we have the wisdom, the courage, and the unity to use it wisely. The eyes of the world are on Canada. Let us give them something worth watching. Thank you for sticking with me through this entire series here on Canada Global Economics. I will see you in the next video.